This guitar interactive feature is brought to you by Elixir Optoweb guitar strings. Play and feel inspired.
Hi, Sam Bell here at Guitar Interactive Magazine, and I'm here today at the Camden Underworld with none other than the amazing Greg Howe. Thank you very much for your time here today.
Good to be here.
I understand you're on your European tour.
Yes.
Of your solo album.
Yes, the Wheelhouse album. Right.
Awesome. I'm going to get into talking about the writing process for that because it's been a while since the last solo album, Soundproof.
That's true, yeah. It's been about almost 10 years. Or actually, it's been 10 years, I think.
Wow, okay. So, and last time you were here, you were with Simon Phillips?
Yeah, that was about a year ago.
And that's a different vibe.
That was a different thing, yeah.
Yeah, and where did you play when you came to the UK?
We played Ronnie Scott's.
Okay, so that's the classic
2 nights there,
kind of jazz venue. Was that a good experience?
It was great, yeah.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
I've heard Scott Henderson talking about that's one of his favourite places in Europe to come to.
It's got a really cool vibe, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So this is a different vibe. This is a solo album tour.
Yes.
And you're playing as a 3-piece. Who are you playing with again?
So it's Ernest Tibbs on bass, and he was in the Protocol band. So once I played with him, I thought, man, I gotta have him.
Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing that then tonight.
And then Gianluca Palmieri, who's done a lot of stuff with me. He was on Soundproof and the Marigold album, and we've done a lot of tours. So yeah, he's usually with me.
Great, awesome. So I'm looking forward to seeing that tonight. So
great.
You're playing the material from Wheelhouse, and
yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be material pulled from various albums.
Sure.
Some stuff off Introspection, some stuff off 5. Nothing off Parallax on this particular one. Extraction, there's quite a bit. And then Wheelhouse, yeah.
Awesome.
And the first album.
Okay. Great. So some of the classic sort of the shrapnel.
Right.
Exactly. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. So I've got some geeky questions to ask about songwriting. So you've got this style where it's of course compositions and you're a musician beyond just being a guitar player, but obviously guitar playing's fantastic. And there's a lot of improvisation in there. So I was going to ask some questions about the songwriting process to create an album like Wheelhouse, which has got some exceptional melodies and the structures are there. But then there's these sections for you to kind of go off
Stretch out, yeah.
Yeah, so what's the process look like for you writing that? Is that something you do yourself, or is it in a studio with other musicians? Or
It's something I generally do by myself. It's also, oddly, something that generally takes place in the best form when I'm not with my instrument.
Okay.
So one of the things I struggle with is that I get ideas, I write in my mind, and then I have to get to my guitar and figure out what that looks like on the fretboard.
Sure.
And sometimes it doesn't look quite as easy as it sounded. So it's a strange thing because I really don't consider myself a guitarist first. I consider myself really a guy that creates music who happens to play the guitar.
Yeah.
So the guitar is kind of the final phase of everything. It's really, I guess to summarize, if for some strange reason guitar playing was made illegal in the world, I would still be very much into music.
Okay.
So I'm motivated more by wanting to deliver something that moves you, that makes you feel something, that says something to you. That's much more where the starting point is of composition, much more so than trying to set up a foundation upon which I can play a lot of stuff,
Sure.
So I don't know how to get into the details of answering your question. You're basically asking what's the process of songwriting and composition. It starts with really just a random inspired idea, and then going with that, believing in it, and then following it and seeing where it goes. Once I grab hold of an idea in my mind, it tends to start to work with me and starts to direct me as to what needs to happen in terms of making this concept be realized. It's hard to explain it, but I don't know if that makes it a little bit.
No, it does make some sense. I was going to ask about, I've seen in other interviews where he's mentioned you'll record voice notes maybe or hum a melody and then work it. Do you how much do you hold on to that initial idea? Are you fairly relaxed about just letting it take a different shape from the initial ideas?
Absolutely. That's something I learned a long time ago, really on the first album, because my very first album was the first time I had written instrumental songs. I actually got a record deal before I had any music. So I had to then learn how to write instrumental stuff, and Mike Varney, the owner of Shrapnel Records at that time, sent me a lot of his artists who I'd never even heard of at that point, like Paul Gilbert and Vinnie Moore and Tony McAlpine and all them. And at least then suddenly I was like, okay, so these are songs, like instrumental without vocals. And I sort of approached it that way because I tend to have, A section, B section, verse, chorus. There's usually a bridge of some sort, and there's usually a main solo. So I kind of approach it the same way I would when it comes to just the actual, mechanics of composition. I'm thinking much more like I would if I was just in a vocal band.
Sure.
But I do remember that there were some melodies as a young person then that I really felt this has to be this way. And then when I got to the studio, Mike Varney was sort of the acting producer at that point, and he would say things like, I think we should take the verse out of this song and we should put it here, and we should take this section out of this song and we should put it in this one. And I remember I was like, no, you can't do that to my stuff, But then in the end, I remember listening back and thinking, that was a good idea. So I learned to let go and allow other perceptions, other opinions, and so I'm better at that now.
Okay.
Sometimes you can go too far with that, where you're not relying at all on your own instinctual sort of impulses, and instead you're just relying on everyone else's feedback, and that can also be dangerous. I think there's a balance, that I try to work within, where I need to feel good about what I'm doing, but I also need to feel like other people are feeling good about what I'm doing. It would be pretty self-indulgent of me to just write what I want. There are some artists out there like that who I really respect, but who I sometimes think to myself, if they would just adjust this a little bit, I think they'd have a much bigger audience. I think it's good that you want to hold on to your, be that guy that doesn't bend, but at the same time, this is communication, where this is interactive. We're trying to find common ground. In my book, that's
sure.
I'm trying to meet everybody in a place where we can all, have a good time.
Yeah. Would you say that your experiences doing the sort of session thing, working with pop artists, has definitely maybe influenced and given you a window into that?
Possibly subconsciously, yeah, because you are forced to play a lot of parts sometimes that, forced, but you're expected to play parts that sometimes in your own mind, or in my own mind, I would think, I wouldn't do this if this was my song, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
But that's what they want, so that's what I'm going to do. And maybe they know, obviously they know, they're huge artists, so they know something. Yeah, it's a tricky subject matter. Every time I get into a conversation about composition, it becomes very abstract, because it is abstract to me. It isn't there isn't a formula. You know what I mean? There isn't.
Sure. No.
It's really just being guided by inspiration and then following that trail and seeing where it goes.
So when do you know when that trail's come to an end for the album? So with like Wheelhouse, for example, how many tracks didn't make the cut?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have just archives of unfinished songs and things that I've started that the next day I listened to and said, no way, or what was I thinking? And then other times things that I put on the back burner for years, and then let me listen to this again, and I think, wow, so you know what? There's something here, and now I'm inspired differently, and I think I can use this as a foundation for a new idea. So it's always different, and that's the thing. For me, I have to be inspired. I have to, and that's why a lot of times on my albums, you'll probably find, at least this is what I'm told, that every one of my albums sort of has its own little personality. They don't really all just sound like new versions of the same thing. And that's because there is a sort of, I need a little bit of uncharted territory to stay motivated. I don't know how people put out albums that keep sounding exactly the same. I actually admire that and envy it, because I wish that I was comfortable enough with what I'm doing to just be like, I'll do some more of that. For me to be inspired, I have to get into places that they don't have to be completely different, but it has to be uncharted territory to a degree.
Sure.
So with Wheelhouse, it was interesting because I had been trying so hard to get a vocal situation happening. I had a band called Marigold a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I was really happy with the way the album came out and the way the compositions came out, but we couldn't really, internally, we couldn't get along with each other.
Oh, dear. Okay.
So that just wasn't going to happen. So I actually started working with another singer, a guy by the name of Michael Grimm, who's one of the most amazing singers I've ever heard. But again, there were things, more administrative-based things that just we couldn't connect on. So finally I was like, I got to get back to doing something,
Yeah.
I'm trying to make this thing work. Maybe I'll just wait for another moment where that seems appropriate, but in the meantime, I'll get back on the horse with my instrumental thing. And that's, so actually 3 of the tunes on this album were originally intended to be vocal tunes. 2 in 1, which is a sort of a, it's, what's the word I'm looking for?
That's the sort of like bluesy, swingy.
Yeah, it's the swing.
And it's 2 different sections,
Right.
almost like kind of A and B.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's a song that you would sort of expect to hear like Tony Bennett sing on, or Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And there was a female singer that I really wanted to do that. And actually, when you hear the melody in the verse, that was really a scratch track for the vocalist. Because I was like, here's the melody I'm hearing. See if you can come up with some lyrics with that. And we just didn't get it going quick enough, so I just left it. I didn't even go back and fix the melody. I just left the scratch track.
I could really tell actually. Now you've said that, it's like it clicks.
Yeah.
It did have that sort of vibe, the Sinatra thing.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Chilled out. Yeah.
That was the intention. That was originally supposed to be vocals. There's a song called Throwdown that was written specifically for the second Marigold album, and that got converted into instrumental. And then Let It Slip. That was a Marigold song. And then, of course, there is a vocal song on there called Shady Lane, which Richie Kotzen did an amazing job singing on. So a lot of that stuff was coming from more of the vocal mentality.
Yeah.
And that was actually fun. It was fun to convert that stuff. When you're writing for vocals, there tends to be a little bit more of a hook element, just sort of by default built into things. So with instrumental, it was nice because I just felt like, at first I was like, how am I going to make an instrumental song out of this? And then once I started getting in there, not only did it seem to fall together, but it seemed ideal. It almost seemed sort of like the silver lining. Like, it's good that it didn't work out with vocalists. This helped my instrumental have a slightly different twist to it.
Sure. When you come to laying down sort of more solo sections, there's a natural sort of sound. It's not like you've sort of composed a solo. Obviously, you've got this kind of fusion vibe going on.
Sure.
A lot of versatility in your playing.
Thank you.
How do you keep that fresh for yourself? It doesn't. Not to say it doesn't, because it sounds fresh. But from your perspective, I know as an improvising guitar player myself, at the best of times it can be quite hard.
That's a really good question. And there are times I sit down in the studio and I'm just not really in that zone, and so I just walk away from it because I have to feel it for it to have any meaning to me. Otherwise, it's just my fingers playing notes on the fretboard with no real storyline,
Yeah.
So it's just and I don't. Again, it's an abstract thing to talk about. I have to be. When I see guitar players just sit down and just improvise in a spontaneous moment, it sounds so good. That does happen sometimes, but it doesn't happen as much as I wish it did with me. With me, it's more when it comes to a solo section, I'm either really inspired and then it happens quick, or it is a situation where I start playing and I'll just play until I don't like what I'm playing anymore. And if I like everything I've done up to that point, then I'll keep it and then come in from there. It's all improvised, but a lot of times it's sort of pieced together.
Sure. Okay.
So it's probably not super. There's been a few solos I've just played from start to finish, but I think on Wheelhouse most of those solos were kind of like Let me have another listen. I usually, that's the other thing, is I like to listen to a solo section like 10 times before I even start playing.
Okay.
And I start hearing things. I start, and a storyline starts to build, if that makes any sense. Suddenly, you know, I hear the appropriate intro, or what I would consider the appropriate intro. I hear the appropriate peak point.
Yeah.
Whatever unexpected left turns that are going to be made, I kind of start to hear where they would be or how they would come about. So it helps me just listen for a while and then pick up the guitar and start playing.
What are you working on as a player, as a musician? What do you find yourself listening for? You know, maybe when you sit down with a guitar, just when you have time.
It's interesting because what blows my mind today are guitarists that can make big statements with small amounts of notes. That blows my mind. I mean, it really does. Sincerely, it does. When and you know, if I hear like a Derek Trucks, or even, you know, hanging out with Andy Timmons, and there's just a certain way that certain players will play the same 3-4 notes I can play, but it's 4 times bigger somehow. And I don't know how that happens. So it's intriguing, and it's something that I really focus on more. And because we live in an age now where you can turn on YouTube and watch 8-year-olds ripping through Paul Gilbert licks, and you know, for me now, it's really what, you know, my technique, however much I have, is really only for the purpose of being able to have as much a variety of ways of reaching you as possible. It would be fantastic to not have to figure out a way to move you and not have to practice a lot to do that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what blows me away now, and that's if I had to, you know, sort of have one answer about what it is I tend to work on. I don't really practice, to be honest with you. I pick up the guitar and I just start playing and try to make music and have fun with it. I probably should practice. So this is not good advice. I'm not saying do this. I'm just saying I've really not ever been a guy that sits down and practice, that has a practice regimen where I warm up with this exercise and then work on alternate picking and work on left hand and work. I've never done that.
Sure. I was more pointing the question towards maybe, you know, experimenting with different harmony, different, like picking up, like listening as well, like listening diet maybe, so to speak, like keeping things fresh inspirationally outside of physically the guitar itself, like musicianship. And
I don't find myself being drawn too much to stuff that's really super strange. I mean, to be honest with you, I have an MP3 collection that is like, I'd be embarrassed to show it to my students or, you know, fans, because it's so many guilty pleasures.
Yeah, that's good though. I like the guilty. It's good to have those guilty pleasures. Pop music and all that sort of stuff is.
Yeah, because as a younger person, I went through so much listening of advanced music, advanced rhythms, advanced harmony, and just, you know, absorbing it and understanding it. Sometimes wanting to incorporate some of it into my playing, sometimes not, but at least understanding it. But I also think that it's amazing when somebody can use the same familiar chords and chord changes and intervals to somehow create something brand new that hasn't been done yet. I think that's in a certain way more impressive or more intriguing. It's just like, how did you do that? How did you write this? How could this song have not already been written?
Yeah.
You know, that blows my mind. So
awesome. Yeah, nice.
I don't find it difficult to get really outside and get really weird, to get really creative and strange. That because there's no real boundaries in this kind of music. You know, it's not like we're expecting to get airplay and stuff. So there's no boundaries. I find that creating the boundaries sometimes helps with creativity. What can I do within these parameters? You know, how can I be creative, but within a certain context? That helps inspire ideas.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, I'm not really working on anything, but I don't have any sort of exotic scales that I'm.
No, yeah. Just general listening, I guess, is what makes us grow.
Yeah, I think
as musicians. I think, like, because we are what we eat in the sense of listen to eventually.
Right.
And if you're listening to, that's the other side of nowadays. You can go on Instagram and you get people doing a 50-second clip, and it's
Sure.
probably the most notes, most key changes, whatever it is. But then you're left. Just what was that?
What was it? Yeah.
And so the goal is, like, it sounds to me your journey is finding.
Yeah, I want to make
minimal
statements, right?
Statements. Yeah.
I want to make statements that have meaning and that are big. It's like when you watch an actor that can say so much with just an expression, or 2 words, but with the right expression, and it's big. It really is 1,000 words. You know, that's, I think, subconsciously what I'm really trying to work towards.
Sure.
I don't feel very successful with it, but it is sort of the underlying goal, I think.
So as this is, I've got so many questions I could ask right now.
Go ahead.
But down to identity as a musician, and being sort of finding your own sound, and through that, like, sort of cutting out what you're trying. Like I noticed that some players, like myself, actually, that was somebody else's phrase, or I'm thinking, you know, someone might have said something, and it kind of subconsciously gets into your improvisational setting. Is that something I
think we all have.
Fighting that voice almost of the...
Sure, absolutely. I think that's just a natural occurrence. I mean, we're all interacting. We're all, you know, nobody isn't influenced by somebody, you know. But it has been really an important thing, even from a young age, to, you know, once I decided I think I'm going to be a guitar player, it was really important for me to have the same quality that all my favorite guitar players had, which is a voice that is quickly and easily recognizable, where you can hear 3 or 4 notes and go, oh, that's George Benson, oh, that's Jimi Hendrix, or that's Alan Holdsworth, or that's John Scofield. And I don't know how, you know, I'm always flattered when people think that I'm a really good guitar player, and I don't even know if I agree, but I do know this. I do think I have my own sound, and a signature sound that is that you can recognize quickly, which is really what was much more important to me than being like the best or whatever.
Yeah,
you know.
I think that's a goal that everyone needs to, especially nowadays when I could go back to Instagram again, but
exactly,
you need a voice, definitely.
I think so. I just think otherwise, what's the point? You know, when people say to me, can you do this Wes Montgomery, George Benson? I'm like, why would I do that? They've already done it. They're doing it. That's the best. I mean, maybe there's other territory that no one has discovered yet that we can start to go down that road. We don't have to put all of these already created genres on a pedestal. They're great, but doesn't mean that we have to do that. We can recognize the greatness as something that was so original at that time. Like, for me, it's the originality of that and the newness of it, the freshness of it, that made it so great. It is that it didn't exist prior to whoever did it first, not that it became something that everyone then wanted. You know, it's like when Van Halen came out and started doing all these things that hadn't been done. What blew me away was not so much what he was doing, but more that he was doing things that hadn't been done, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because you're just sitting there going, wow, you know, that was, we all could have done that. Why didn't we do that? So I just tend to think, everything that I think about when it comes to music really has more to do with creativity than virtuosity, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
We come from a conditioned mentality that, you know, if this guy can run this fast and you can run faster, then that's better. If this guy can type 50 words a minute and you can type 60, that's better. Usually, being able to do something faster than someone else means that you're better at it. And in music, there's maybe a component where that makes sense, but it is a different animal. This is creativity. So it's not. There are too many amazing musicians out there that don't really rely on virtuoso technique to sound great. So it's obviously not something that's a deal breaker.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, but it is something that it's easily measurable. That's why I think younger people go to it, because they can go, I can do this better than I did it yesterday. It's cleaner and it's faster, so now I'm better than I was before.
Yeah, it's quantifiable goal.
Exactly.
You sort of see it happening, yeah.
Right.
So I've got two more questions. Thank you for your time today, Greg. I appreciate this. So you probably answered this actually within what we've been talking about, but what would your advice be for a freelance guitar player in 2018?
2018.
Somebody who wants to be maybe for me as an inspiration, you've done the session thing and the instrumental thing and the songwriter thing, and it's a great sort of model almost of what most players would love to be doing, I guess, been doing the session thing and teaching and all that aside. So what advice would you say you'd have from your perspective?
From my perspective, the big change in the world is social media. And social media is a very, if you use it to your advantage, it's a very, very, potentially very powerful tool, very powerful method of getting recognition, getting heard. And I've seen a lot of players, like you mentioned, who probably would not have been, you would know about today if it weren't for social media. So I think I would advise anyone to just take advantage of that as much as possible. What I notice is that guys who put out a lot of videos and who are constantly just appearing and talking about music and playing music and expressing their opinions about music, they tend to get followings and recognition. And I think it's kind of cool because you're no longer so much, at least, at the mercy of someone else's decision about whether or not you're going to have a career. Okay. And it used to be that way. It used to be that, man, if this guy doesn't sign us to his record label, I don't know, how are we going to ever, what if we don't, how, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So social media is a beautiful thing. I've actually, the last two albums I did, which is Marigold and Wheelhouse, I've had record labels approach me and want to put it out. And, it's sort of like, what is the upside to that today for me? How do I win from that? Because a record label will end up taking a really big cut, which is fine as long as it's in exchange for something beyond what I can do without them. So I think that there are certain disadvantages of today, but I think if I zoom out, I would rather have this scenario of today's world in music than 20 years ago, because you just have more freedom. You have more power to make your own decision about what you want to do. So my advice would be that make sure you love this. Make sure you have no problem spending every single day of your life just being completely engulfed in this. And then and don't be afraid to share it with the world as much as you possibly can, because there's going to be people out there that are really into what you're doing. So that would be my advice, would be to take advantage of social media as much as you possibly can, because it's even worked for me. There are tons of people who have seen like a video, say, I have a video of me doing my own little sort of backing track rendition of the song Sunny. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many promoters we've had contact us who have said, yeah, I've never heard of this Greg Howe guy before. I mean, I already had multiple albums out by the time that, and I saw this guy on YouTube, and yeah, we'd love to have him come over here and be in the festival, so it is pretty powerful, potentially. That would be one. I guess the other thing would just be to make sure you love it. Make sure it's just something you love, that I went through a phase when I was younger, not even that long ago, when I was really into gaming, first-person shooter gaming, playing online, and at one point I was so into it that it was like I'd wake up in the morning, I'd think, I want to find a cool server, play 2 games, and then like I couldn't, I couldn't get enough of it.
Wasn't that you weren't questioning it at all? You just went and did it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the feeling you want to have with music, or with guitar, or whatever you're doing in music. I just think when it's real for you, when that's the feeling you have about it, when it's something you just can't keep your hands off of.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a very nice positive message as well about the social media, because I think there are some guitarists, it can be quite sort of negative as well. Some people take it negatively, but I think what you're saying here is finding it's an opportunity.
Yes.
If you can be yourself and love it and make the right decisions.
Yes.
Someone's going to find it, and if
that's exactly
consistency
right.
and
that's exactly right.
Being honest as well, I guess.
If you're being honest and you're really doing what you love and you're really feeling 100% good about what you're sharing with the world, it's going to move you to somewhere. It's going to go somewhere. I've seen it too many times, and it will happen.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about a lot of people, social media gets a lot of flack, and it deservedly sometimes. But I've seen, generally speaking, when something is really of quality, it rises to the top. People notice it, they start liking it, and then suddenly it shows up at first when you type in someone's name or you type in the right words. So the whole idea of, the internet's cool, but you got to filter through so much crap. Yeah, there's some of that, but most of the crap kind of stays on the bottom, and the cool stuff generally rises to the top. Not always. Sometimes you find gems.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, if something's really good, it tends to catch fire.
Cool. Great. So last question.
Okay.
What's next for Greg Howe?
Well, I just joined a band with Jeff Berlin
wow.
and Dennis Chambers and David Sanchez.
Okay.
So I think they came up with the name Moshulu. I don't know why. I'm not sure exactly. But we're going to be doing a lot of touring next year, and I'm going to see if I can talk Jeff into maybe doing at least a couple of recordings to attach the name to, a couple of original ideas. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I will definitely be touring quite a bit with that band next year.
Awesome. That's going to be great.
And possibly start working on a new album. I have to see what the schedule is going to be with touring, to see how realistic it is for me to actually get a new product out. I'd love to, but
it's following where the creativity and the opportunities lie, I guess.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure myself and everyone at Guitar Interactive and fans will really look forward to the projects next year. But thank you so much for your time today, Greg.
My pleasure.
I really look forward to the show later on.
All right.
Pleasure
Thank you very
to meet
much.
you. I've been Sam Bell here at Guitar Interactive Magazine with Greg Howe at the Camden Underworld, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
This Guitar Interactive feature is brought to you by Elixir Optoweb Guitar Strings. Play and feel inspired.